What's up, everybody? Welcome to another Alchemy Mondays. We've missed a couple of days, but it's not too late. So I just want to get this out of the way real quick. I have never had this much trouble trying to get half-inch tubing from anybody. But Amazon apparently seems to think that it's a very controlled thing and they can't leave half-inch tubing on my porch. So they've decided to delay it another day. So unfortunately, no Soxolite extracting tonight. But I thought I'd at least show you that this is the problem I'm constantly coming up with is they apparently don't know how to leave a package inside the door. And even though I leave them the code, they have to have me come and sign for half-inch tubing. Which,
yeah, it doesn't say.
Go ahead.
There's no requirement marked that there's a signature required or anything.
Nope. But they've got to have you there because I've ordered a bunch of other stuff that could be used to make illegal substances. So therefore, I now have to sign for everything, which I'm not making illegal substances. This is for a YouTube channel, for fuck's sake.
Yeah.
But I just thought I'd throw that in there. Half-inch tubing is apparently really hard to get a hold of if you've ordered a vacuum condenser. So I wanted to go into a little bit of Eastern alchemy before we get started. I thought this was good. We were talking about the lower Dantian and sort of the place where feng shui practitioners and qigong practitioners store their energy. So I thought I'd show you this. This has to do with sort of an Eastern idea of alchemy. So I thought I'd start off with this.
Yeah.
Hit it.
To store the energy in Dantian, there is a traditional, simple practice. You have a space we call a cauldron, and a space that you can store energy is below the navel. We store our primordial force here. Then when you're born, the energy is stored here. Every day we spend the energy. When you sleep well, you charge them. You only charge in the sleeping, but you can do the practice. We always think about a red fire, and the red fire is connecting with the kidney. So the right kidney is yang, the left kidney is yin kidney. Usually we start the red fire and charge into the kidney now. And when you want to finish, you come back to the Dantian again, and there's space to hold energy. To store the energy in Dantian.
All right. So what are your thoughts on that? The storage of lower Dantian energy.
Well, it's rubedo, right? Because red, focusing on red. And it's an interesting place for it. Almost like in the reproductive area. And I feel like that makes sense because the rubedo is, I guess, like if you're talking about like spiritual alchemy, it would be like living fully, kind of.
Well, if you think about it, the reproductive organs are like a much slower version of fire, right? So you're reproducing humans, they're going out, they're eating all the stuff. It's like a slower version of fire, but it's sort of the same idea. Like you're taking the universal principle and you're putting it inside of the body and you're saying, hey, control your own fire. I thought that was kind of interesting because, you know, you've got sort of the alchemical principles applied to human life instead of herbs and, you know, minerals.
Yeah, I wish I knew more about kidneys.
Well, for the Chinese traditional medicine, kidneys are huge, right? So not only is this where it purifies the body, but also provides you with an extra boost of energy in the form of adrenal glands, which are right on top of the kidneys.
Does it purify the blood?
Yes. The kidneys take the waste products out of the blood, and that's where you get your urine from. So it's a filter for all of the worst stuff. So
interesting.
So do you want to get started on the Paracelsus? And then I've got some stuff from Spagyrix that we can read.
Sure. Let's see. Okay. So we are on chapter 6 of the Philosopher's Tincture by Paracelsus. One second. Paracelsus Theophrastus Bombast. That's
Paracelsus von Hohenheim.
I'm gonna name my kid that.
Be careful. That's very Swedish. Very Swiss. Not Swedish.
I'll dye their hair blonde. Okay. Chapter 6, concerning the transmutation of metals by the perfection of medicine. If the tincture of the philosophers is to be used for transmutation, a pound of it must be projected on 1,000 pounds of melted soul. As in, yeah, SOL soul, not the soul.
SOUL.
Yeah. Then at length will a medicine have been prepared for transmuting the leprous moisture of the metals. This work is a wonderful one in the light of nature, namely, that by the magistry or the operation of the spagyrist, a metal which formerly existed should perish and another be produced. This fact has rendered that same Aristotle, with his ill-founded philosophy, fatuous, for truly, when the rustics in Hungary cast iron at the proper season into a curtain fountain, commonly called Zifferbrunnen, it is consumed into rust, and when this is liquefied with a blast fire, it soon exists as pure Venus, and never more returns to iron. Similarly, in the mountain commonly called Kuttenberg, they obtain a lixium out of marcassites, in which iron is forthwith turned into Venus of a high grade and more malleable than the other produced by nature. These things, and more like them, are known to simple men rather than to sophists, namely those which turn one appearance of a metal into another, and these things, moreover, through the remarkable contempt of the ignorant, and partly too on account of the just envy of the artificers, remain almost hidden, but I myself in Istria have often brought Venus to more than 24 AL 38 degrees.
Is he talking about the purity of the metal? Because they've always had a problem getting copper ultra pure, and that would make sense if he's talking about Venus. I'm not sure.
Like aluminum 38, grade 38.
See, that's the thing. You know, would it be aluminum? Is that what they would be calling it back then?
AL.38. I don't know.
It looks like a citation in the book.
I'll check. So that the color of soul could not mount higher, consisting of antimony or cortal, which Venus I used in all respects as other kinds. Venus.
He's talking about copper, right? He's talking about doing some sort of metallurgical work between gold and copper.
Why does he hate on Aristotle?
Dude, Aristotle was a snob, right? So he's saying, okay, so this place in Hungary that he's talking about is probably the place where metallurgy started, or at least in his conception, metallurgy started in this place in Hungary. And he's saying all of these farmers who basically only had their connection with God are the ones who are able to do this amazing stuff with metals because they were following the path of nature. You know, they weren't highfalutin about it. They just sort of plodded along. They did one step after the other. They talked with God, they talked with the spirits, and then they just went forward. And I think that's really what he's trying to get at is like, it doesn't take a super genius to figure this stuff out. You just have to get in touch with the materials.
That makes sense. Right, like a intuitive connection to it.
Right? You're asking questions and then you're following the answers. And I've noticed a lot of modern day alchemists follow that same method. They use divination as a part of their alchemy practice. If they don't know the answer to something, they start to test it out using muscle restriction. I don't know if you've ever seen that before, where they push on your arm as they're asking you questions, and based off of the muscle resistance, they can tell whether or not you're being honest or what the answer really is when it comes to the stuff. Muscle tension testing or something like that. I'm not sure what it's called. But I've seen alchemists actually use that in their own personal practice as a form of like divination or dowsing, as they're trying to explore how to, make this stuff happen. They're going to test it in multiple ways using very mystical means. And people don't normally associate mystical means with a way of solving problems. But when it comes to alchemy, what you're trying to do is you're trying to narrow down the different spiritual sources so that the spiritual sources are being accurate when they're telling you what to do with the metals.
I mean, yeah, it makes me think too of like, I don't know, soldering or something, and kind of you learn to just kind of feel that
Bingo.
out. It's a
Exactly.
pretty intuitive practice.
If you haven't gotten into welding or soldering or working with metals and starting to understand how they react under certain conditions, you're not really going to understand what we're saying. But it all comes down to technique. He talks about the artificers, right? The artificers, they're making this sort of grand theory, but they're not actually engaging in the work. And that's one of the big problems he has with doctors is they're engaging in a lot of theory, but how does that actually play out? And so, he's one of these establishment haters because he knows that the vast majority of what an establishment, academic, or whatever does is just repeat other people's work and then claim to be smart in the process.
Yup, and nothing is gonna be more valuable than like tribal knowledge, as in like experience, you know, like
Well,
yeah.
that's the thing even in itself. Like you can go to these places and talk with the people and you'll never fully grasp the knowledge that they're giving to you because you have no reference point for the type of knowledge that they have. You can find this in a lot of anthropology works. Like the anthropologist will not understand the tribes that they're coming into because the words that they're translating it as don't really have the same meanings that they do for the tribe. So you've got to be there on the ground to figure out exactly what it means. So experience is the best proof. If you've got the experience doing the work, you're the guy to go to. It's not that hard. It's not that high-minded. You don't have to be a genius. You just have to sort of follow the path of nature. And I actually have a segment sort of plotted out here.
Oh
It's
wait,
funny how
let's
that works
finish
out.
this one up.
Oh, sure.
Okay. All right, last paragraph of chapter 6. But though the old artists were very desirous of this arcanum and sought it with the greatest diligence, nevertheless very few could bring it by means of a perfect preparation to its end. For the transmutation of an inferior metal into a superior one brings with it many difficulties and obstacles, as the change of Jove into Luna or Venus into Sol, perhaps on account of their sins. God willed that the magnalia of nature should be hidden from many men. For sometimes when this tincture has been prepared by artists and they were not able to reduce their projection to work its effects, it happened that by their carelessness and bad guardianship, this was eaten up by fowls whose feathers thereupon fell off, and as I myself have seen, grew again. In this way, transmutation, through its abuse from the carelessness of the artist, came into medicine and alchemy, for when they were unable to use the tincture according to their desire, they converted the same to the renovation of men, as shall be heard more at large in the following chapter.
Wow. That's actually really prescient when you think about how much industrial waste is used as a product in medicine. Like we've got all this petroleum-based medicine, which is just waste products from the refining process of oil putting into our medicine. It sounds like what he's talking about. Like they just sort of stopped and they figured they couldn't go any further, so they decided to make it with to turn it into medicine instead. See how it affects the human being.
I bet
Seems to be
salts. I
the-
bet there's so many salts that are byproducts too.
Oh, big time. It's like metallic salts are very important to all industrial processes, and hardly anybody pays attention to them. But metallic salts are how they've done nuclear fusion. You know, metallic salts are these sort of like I guess connective tissue between industrial processes, where you're absorbing heat, you're producing another product through solubility. All these other things are happening with those metallic salts, and we're just not paying attention to it all that much, even though it's a runoff in most products we consume. Go figure.
Yeah, I remember that Occult Rejects episode, and there was that guy on that was
Donald Ferguson.
talking about like thousands of salt. Like there are thousands of these salts. It's kind of crazy. That was a really good
Right.
episode.
Yeah, we need to have him back on.
Yeah, I bet
But-
he would be so interesting in the alchemy.
Exactly. Yeah, I've been trying to get him on. He's always talking to me on Instagram, and I'm like, dude, just come on the show. You know how it is. All right, so this is what I got from Spagirix. Again, it goes in the same, like, you know, I guess maybe I might be ham-fisting what you're talking about into this, but it's all about following the path of nature. So it says, the old masters recommended that we always follow nature and let her do the work of her own like a farmer. The closeness of alchemy to agriculture has often been emphasized, and there were alchemists who assumed the nickname Agricola. Figure 3. I love this picture. Can you see it? So you've got the alchemist with his little lantern following the path of this goddess as she's sort of walking along. So that would be kind of the idea of following the path of nature. And he's sort of in the dark and she's always standing in the light. So it's split in half. You can kind of see that, right? So I just think that's a great illustration of how we kind of interact with the world around us. We're not fully aware of the changes that are actually happening, but
What's
we
on her
think,
back? Does she have something?
well, in a lot of Greek images, spirits or wind connected deities are often shown with that kind of a billowing sail coming off of their back. You see what I'm saying? So it's kind of like filling up that sail. That's often associated with the idea of spirits in Greek cosmology. So you'll find Eos will be represented with a huge billowing frock coming behind her in that sort of a lens shape. But it's actually very common with the Greek motifs to have that. And it's usually associated with either spirits or wind. So I think that's probably connected. But she's got, you know, hands full of all of these herbs and all of these preparations. And this guy with the weird goggles on is just trying to follow her footsteps. Kind of reminds me of the Dicyanin goggles, to be honest. Let's see. Figure 3 shows an engraving from Michael Myers' famous work, Atlanta Fuginis, which indicates that the alchemist must follow the steps of nature and light up her ways. It is important for us to remember the possibility of transmutation is a scientifically proven fact and in no way a creation of fancy. The dispute centers on the means, not the fact as such. It was transmutation that made possible the appearance of the whole matter at all in the view of science from the hydrogen that came out of the Big Bang. Heavier elements developed within the birth and death of generations of stars throughout 7 billion years. If we speak of matter as frozen light out of the Big Bang, we can also say in principio erat hydrogenium. In the beginning was hydrogen, which is the most heat related substance in the view of parachemistry. Because anytime you've got a concentration of hydrogen, you can light it on fire and it produces water. So anytime you burn hydrogen in an atmosphere like ours, you'll produce water. Let us now return to spagyrics. For the preparation of the spagyric remedies, only health and medicinal plants are used, which have grown without artificial fertilizer. Likewise, it is best to use pure spring water. In addition, the spagyrist often considers the position of the planets and the planets as so-called horary rulers, right? So we're using the hourly signs for these different preparations. We shall once again quote Paracelsus in this connection. Thus, your medicine must bear its fruit as the summer bears its fruits. You must know that the summer does this with the help of the stars, not without them. If the stars are able to do this, then you must know that the medicine is prepared in this way, and it is ruled by the stars. For it is that complete the work of the physician, and since it is they that act, the medicine must be understood, classified, and adjusted according to their influence. Therefore, one has to understand that the medicine must be prepared in the stars and that the stars become the medicine. And that's why you're here. With the gradual advance of materialism and the spreading notion of the static concept of the element in official chemistry, alchemy lost increasingly more ground, although it was still prospering in the 17th century. Well, if you know about the rise of the deep state in America, you know that they were very, very interested in alchemy very early on. And in fact, in the 1940s, they were contacting alchemists over in Europe to try and understand the nuclear bomb better because they really didn't understand what they were doing. So they brought alchemists to try and explain exactly what was going on. They had chemists, obviously, but the chemists didn't seem too curious about the total production of what they were doing. The alchemists were like, you're doing transmutation. That's what fusion energy is. You're taking one element and then you're fusing the particles into something new. So the nuclear transformation is an alchemical transmutation. This is why they were saying it's not uncommon to have alchemical transmutations. It's what happens inside of a star. The only difference is the alchemists would argue that this alchemical transmutation can take place at much lower temperatures. And this is why it's important to get in touch with the subtle energies, because the subtle energies that act on that substance are going to be the means by which you can achieve nuclear transformation of the elements that you're dealing with into a sublime state. So when you can understand it from the high energy versus the low energy, you'll start to see what the alchemists were talking about, because they incorporated things like prayer and geometry into their works that most chemists have no need for. Why would they? They've got infinite budgets, right? If they're associated with these governmental institutions, they've got infinite energy. So anything that they could want to achieve at a low energy, they could just achieve at a high energy and not have to worry about the way of making it more efficient. So in essence, what we have is the most irresponsible form of chemistry you can imagine, where you're not thinking about the holistic effects of what you're producing. And that's why we have the petrochemicals in our medicines, because it sort of grew out of that same system that Paracelsus sort of advanced.
Well, they would both be kind of very directed medicines targeting a very specific thing. So they're kind of similar that way, but
Well, think about how many times especially the Chinese alchemists were trying to use mercury to extend the life of the emperor. They fed so many emperors mercury. I think they probably killed more Chinese emperors than anybody.
it's kind of hilarious. But it sounds like the meditation and stuff like that is kind of to get in touch with those energies, just like so you can intuitively kind of feel out what you need to do.
To go back to that picture, like the guy who's following nature's footprints around, he doesn't seem very in tune with his own senses, right? He's sort of feeling things out based on something lower than his senses are able to produce. All of the Greek and the Hermeticists, they're way too in their own head, right? They can only achieve that Gnostic state through their own meditations and their own prayers and their own thoughts. There's no like bodily aspect to it. I think that there's probably a bodily aspect that they're sort of missing and just sort of substituting with all of this kind of metaphysics and mental stuff. And I think in a lot of ways, the Chinese guy that I was playing at the beginning, he's incorporating the body into the alchemical process. I think the meditations of Qigong really do go hand in hand with the meditations that they're talking about in alchemy, only in a much more physical, body-centric way than what the alchemists were meditating on.
I mean, but you'd have to imagine they're for different purposes.
Well, it depends. I think a lot of what the Qigong practitioners do is they're trying to focus on the circulation of energy. So it's not just about storing all of the energy in your lower dantian. You're trying to circulate it and then feel the results of it. So as you're trying to bring up the energy, you're supposed to pay attention to how that feels. As it's going down, you're supposed to pay attention to how that feels. And you're sort of turning your body into an antenna, right? You're attenuating to how these different energies affects you most of the day so that you can know what to avoid and what to go towards. A lot of it is integrated with feng shui, which is all about this idea of this water and air energy, right? And the water air energy is sort of where you get the idea of feng shui and how that affects different parts of your room in association with the cardinal directions. And that's, kind of like as we're disturbing the environment around us, there are more cohesive, holistic ways of disturbing it. And then there's far more destructive ways of disturbing it. And you have to follow this massive list of associations to get to the place where you can understand what is beneficial and harmonious versus what is out of balance. So I think in a lot of ways, those associations can be even found in Western alchemy when they're talking about these different metals and how they're associated with different parts of the body and different types of medicine. And metals as medicines was really one of the big achievements that Paracelsus provided to the rest of the doctors at the time, because he was so far ahead of his time. Well, I mean, as we're reading it, you can kind of notice he's blasting everybody. Like he doesn't stop. It's one nonstop diatribe, but he's doing that because they're in this outmoded way of thinking, and he's got to try and wake them up to this other way of thinking. And the only way he can think to do that is by being a real asshole. But I love Paracelsus for that reason. It's just he's always diatribing.
Yeah, I think it makes sense. Just having good energy flow. If you think about it, obviously that's gonna help in a lot of different areas, meditation and um, alignment, all sorts of things.
Well, you've got the why do I always forget this word? So it's where your placebo effect, right? You've got the placebo effect where if you're actually capable of controlling those belief energies within your body, then you're essentially transmuting what is negative associations within your body into positive ones. It's a transmutation. So if you can then incorporate other materials into that transmutation process, which are harmonious with the transformation you're trying to produce, you're going to get an added benefit from that medicine by at least 30%, because this is what they do in most medical trials is they take out about 30% of the positive reactions and they say that's because of the placebo effect. So if it's actually good, they could take out more. And if it's negative, like the placebo effect variable is very, very much under suspicion. I mean, if you've ever looked at these studies and these trials, the way that they mark out the placebo effect is really suspect and actually accurate. So again, they keep talking about medicine when it comes to alchemy, and that's because there is this tie, this linkage between consciousness and the healing process that I think most Western practitioners of medicine just kind of leave at the doorstep, even though their own studies have to make a massive switch or a massive acknowledgement for the placebo effect, which would be that mind body synthesis, right? So, I mean, alchemy and medicine is probably one of the oldest forms of medicine that there is. And I think he's referring to that when he's talking about Hungary and he's talking about how they were transforming metals back when there wasn't even a written language. So, what are your thoughts? Hourly astrology. What are your thoughts on hourly astrology?
Um, on hourly astrology, um, I mean, it's just breaking things down further and further, the cycles. I think it makes sense. Um, I don't have anything too deep or interesting more to say about that. It's just like you're, it's almost like a revamping of that energy.
Now, would the alchemist benefit from understanding the latitude that he's casting his chart from? Because as you're doing the hourly, you would have to also take into account the hours of latitude or the minutes of latitude so that you could accurately get the best hourly time period to actually harvest your herbs.
Yeah, I mean, you could go even further with it too and start doing like locational astrology, like astrocartography if you're like trying to do something on like a Mars line and
You're
you
spiking my
know
interest. Are we talking ley lines?
um no like here I'll pull something up.
I don't think I've heard of Mars lines. So these are on the surface of the planet associated with the heavenly bodies?
Well, this would be specific to people individually. Let's see. Share screen. Okay, can you see this?
Yeah.
Oh. Mm. view image. I want to see it bigger. Okay. Yeah, so basically this would be like this person's astrocartography. And so you can see just kind of like how these lines show up for them. Seems pretty accurate. Like, I live right next to a, oh wait, maybe you can't see this bigger. Wait, let me share it again.
You might have to zoom in.
Okay, there we go. Wait.
All right.
Ah. So this is just based off of the time and place and date you were born. But, you know, I wonder, like, if you would have certain luck different places. You know, if you're doing something really sensitive, you might want to go to a certain place to do it.
Right. And so I think those would have an effect on the sort of flavors of the ley lines in the area. Right. So if you're talking about geomagnetic energy combining with the celestial energies, I could see that happening. So we've got right through the Great Lakes region, we've got, it looks like a yellow and a purple. Do you see what I'm talking about right there? What lines are those?
So this is this person's DC sun line. So that just means that basically if this person were to I guess go right there in between the black and the orange line, then their chart would have their sun on the IC and this, let's see, north node on the AC. It's like kind of like location will twist your chart around. But I know like natally I have, for example, Mars, my Mars on my MC line. I live really close to that. And always having power struggles at work. But
That makes sense.
yeah.
So if you're working with Mars elements, do you think that would put your system back into balance, or would it throw off your system even more? Like, how would you actually affect that type of energy? So you're trying to reduce the amount of power struggle. That Mars line would be trying to amp it up, I guess. How would you influence that? Would you use like Venus type energy to influence your Mars line?
Yeah, I would. I wouldn't add more Mars.
But there are Martian style planets that will take out Mars energy. So there is that as well. You're not only just adding, you're also subtracting. So you getting into the herbalism on this point, especially with these primary 7 planets and how they associate with your region, I think is very critical to understanding how to walk the path of nature. Once you've got your 7 planetary plants laid out, which that's something we could do next week, is just go over the most common 7 planetary herbs and talk a little bit about them. But those would definitely go along with these lines in your chart. But this is like 102 level and not 101 level, and that's what I love to get into.
Well, and too,
Not sticking to
yeah, that's a good point because it's like you could at least just look at your chart and see like where you have to be cognizant, like where you might have to kind of try to balance those energies to have successful outcomes in your alchemy, but also your life.
Do you want to give them a homework assignment? I want to participate too. So, how would we find our chart and our ability to see these nodal lines in our what did you call it? Planetary
It's called astrocartography.
astrocartography.
Yeah, so like you would, can you still see the screen if I
Yep.
do this?
Yep.
Okay, I would go to AstroSeek, astrocartography. And then you can just put your birth information in here. I don't really care if you guys see this. Though yeah. So you need your date of birth, your time of birth, which will be on your birth certificate, your place of birth, and then let's see. Okay. I guess it doesn't ask anything else. And then, yep, it'll just pull this up. Yeah, you can see this. Mars on the MC. Looks like, decent amount away, but I definitely feel that. And then this blue line, Pluto on my DC. I don't know, it's kind of interesting to look at this stuff and look at if you feel like you've had a lot of those themes in your life. But yeah, then if you have some Pluto influence or some Mars influence, I would say especially like on your MC, for me and Headless doing this, for example, like if I were doing these experiments and it's in the public eye, like that would kind of be one you would want to mitigate. Pluto on the DC.
How am I getting in touch with the Mercury on this one? Because it seems like Mercury is failing me hard.
True. Maybe we should pull yours up.
Well, we'll do that offline. I don't want to give everybody my chart.
But
you can always tell who takes it seriously or not by who's willing to put out their date of birth and location and hour of birth on a live stream. If they're willing to do that, they don't really take it seriously.
I mean, I just don't really believe in I don't think that people can, I don't know. Some people would be like, oh, don't put your information out there because people evil eye you or something like that. But
I think it's far less mystical and far more psychological. If they know the psychological pressures to put you under because of your chart, without even getting to know you, there you go. There's your in. You can start to use those frequencies to mess with people and set up situations that.
Well, hey, they would be a good astrologer.
Right. I think a lot of women do that when they're talking about what's your sign. Like they're figuring out ways that they can get one over on you because they understand it, right?
I don't know, because usually they're just like, Gemini, toxic.
Right? There's that too.
I feel like, yeah, but if they're good at it, then for sure, probably worry.
All right. So the homework for next week is get on AstroSeek. Everybody in the comments, get on AstroSeek and look up your cartography, your stellar cartography, because that's something that we're going to get into. So it's good to have it on hand. At least you can know the geography of your personal astrology chart, right? You know, I mean, there's nothing more actionable than geography. So as soon as you can look at this thing and say, oh shit, that makes sense, I need to get away from this place, you've already got an answer. You know, it's that simple.
Yeah, if you live on a Pluto line or something, maybe move.
Right. Get some good energies. No reason to get stuck in the underworld. But this was another great episode of Alchemy Mondays. By next week, I promise, guys, we'll get that Soxhlet up and cranking. And also, we're going to go over the 7 common planetary herbs that are going to be in North America. So stay tuned for that one. And definitely share the show. Get it out to your friends. I think we're having a fun time. You know, we're going over astrology and we're going over alchemy, the 2 things that nobody really understands, but everybody's talking about. So this is your foot in the door. Thank you very much. Go ahead and tell them where they can find you, Eros. And
Yeah, you can find me on X at Eros to Ethos, and you can find me on YouTube at ErosUp. Definitely check it out. Give me a follow.
absolutely. And you know where you can find me? Tomorrow we got 777 coming up with Nick. So definitely tune in for that one. And we'll see you again next time. Thank you.